Hey everybody, and welcome to Inside Quest. We are the MMA training camp for your mind. Our goal is to bring on amazing people who can help you battle harden your brain. And if you're looking to become the heavyweight champion of mental jiu-jitsu, there is no better guest than the man joining us today. With an undergrad degree in philosophy and a PhD in whooping that ass, he is truly a modern-day warrior philosopher. And while they say that those who can do and those who can't teach, this former competitive fighter has not only won multiple titles in Jiu-Jitsu and Muy Thai, but he's also widely recognized as one of the most effective and successful coaches in mixed martial arts, proving that those who can always make the best teachers. His unique, highly hands-on approach has imbued his teaching methods with a practiced effectiveness that comes from constantly checking theory against real-world evidence. His ruthless pragmatism and near-spiritual pursuit of truth and efficiency has helped him transform Montreal's TriStar Gym from hometown hero into a globally recognized brand of excellence that turns out MMA stars like Silicon Valley turns out tech. He has worked with and helped shape some of the most dominant figures in UFC, including Rory McDonald, Kenny Florian, and Georges St-Pierre, a man considered to be one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters of all time. A highly educated and fiercely intellectual traveler through this thing called life, this undisputed patriarch of TriStar Martial Arts Gym franchise is as ready to delve into a deep discussion about philosophy and neuroscience as he is about fighting. He takes being intellectually well-rounded to a whole new level. And I'm thrilled to say that I had the distinct honor of rolling with this gracious man during my first ever Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu lesson. Talk about starting at the top. I can say with confidence that I have never met anyone quite like him. His ability to effortlessly transition from aggression and controlled violence to intellectual and emotional beauty is absolutely breathtaking. He is a master who perpetually wears the yoke of the humble student, always willing to listen, always willing to learn. And in his relentless pursuit of knowledge and mastery, he has risen to the top of one of the fastest growing, most competitive and dangerous sports on the planet. I cannot say enough good things about this man, so I will simply note that the lessons learned in a mere 2 hours of training with him continue to echo through my life almost a year later. Please help me in welcoming the man who has been called wise, philosophical, exceptionally analytical, in-depth, and innovative, the legendary MMA coach, Firas Zahabi. Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
It's an honor, man. It's a pleasure.
Now, looking out at this crowd, which is bizarrely mixed in personality types, and I'm sure that people that are longtime viewers of the show are wondering why I have an MMA guy, and I'm sure people in the MMA world ask you why on earth you trained in philosophy. But I think that false dichotomy between pursuits of the body and pursuits of the mind are actually dangerous and lead people to living sort of underdeveloped lives. Do you agree with that?
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. You know, success for me, it's threefold, and one of the main two is your mind and your body. If I see somebody who's very intellectual and smart, but his waistline is out of control, his health is out of control, it's negatively out of control, I don't necessarily define him as successful. And what use is that knowledge he has if he can't keep his body healthy, he can't keep his system healthy? And for me, if you have knowledge, it shows in the real world. You know, and if you have knowledge of health and fitness, etc., if you're a knowledgeable person, you know that that's one of the most important things you have to take care of is your health and fitness. So for me, it's not a contradiction to read a book and then go spar and wrestle and choke people out. It's not a contradiction. They go together.
To read a book and then go choke people out. It goes hand in hand. I like that. I will say though, so having the chance to actually roll with you, there was something so and I don't know if this is common, but kinetic chess, right? The concept of jiu-jitsu ultimately being an intellectual chess match, but is played out kinetically. And there's something about that contact, about not only contact with the other person, but contact in terms of how it roots you in your own physicality, of needing to know how to move, that I found utterly astonishing. And it really made me almost mourn that I didn't find that earlier. And it's one of the things over the last year I've really, I mean, despite being involved in a health company, it's really only now that I'm beginning to get a fully developed sense of the mind-body connection. Why do you think in today's modern society that connection is lacking or just fully misunderstood?
You know, I think society, because we're in such a great position, the generations are getting softer and softer. You know, you didn't have to struggle to eat. You didn't have to struggle to find a warm bed. You know, you were given all these things. Life is pretty easy. So what happens is the mind starts to become softer. You're used to living a more cushy life. So what happens is, if you look at the Spartans or the Romans, etc., you had to wrestle. When you were born, you had to wrestle. If you didn't know how to wrestle, you were weak. You will get nothing. You cannot earn anything in life. You had to either be a farmer or a soldier, one of the two. And 90% of the boys were soldiers, right? First, at least at one point in their life. So being tough was such an important thing, and wrestling is the key. I don't think you should teach kids boxing. And a lot of people take their young kids and put them in boxing because there's blows to the head. But wrestling, there's no blows to the head, but it'll teach you that toughness, that physicality, that once you have that mental, that mindset, that toughness, everything else in life is easy. Dan Gable, one of the best wrestlers in the history of America, said, after wrestling, everything in life is easy, because there's nothing more challenging, more physically intimidating than wrestling. Going man to man, my strength against your strength, my brains against your brains. It's something that just brings something out of you. It builds you from the inside out. And I think we don't have that anymore. Plato says, in the Republic, he says, well, this is how you raise a human being. You don't teach him any philosophy early on. He has to exercise and he has to wrestle. And then later on, when he's 30, then you start teaching him philosophy and so on. But that foundation was a physical test. That's how you build the mind.
Did he really say not to start the philosophical training until you're 30?
No philosophy. No philosophy till 30. You weren't ready yet. You were not ready yet. As a matter of fact, one youngster went to Aristotle. Aristotle was a student of Plato, and he asked him, teach me the truth. Aristotle took him by the hair and dunked his head in the water and was drowning him. And then he took him out and he said, when you want the truth, like you wanted air just now, then come to me, ask me that question again. Because he was just a young kid, and he was asking a question. But he's saying, if you want to pursue truth, you have to want it like air when you're drowning. That you have to want it that badly. It's not a casual question you just ask.
Yeah, I've heard that fable before, contributed to other people, about the student who climbs the mountain and he gets to the top, who the master's going to teach him, and the same thing, right? He dunks his head down just before he passes out, lifts his head up, then back down. And I fear that people read that passage and they get caught up in the story and they miss the truth of if you're drowning, like really, really, your face is in water and you are drowning, there is a desperation to get that air where you will do anything, right? You would dislocate your own arm trying to flail and get off whoever's grabbing you. There's truly no limit to what you would do to get out from that situation. Mm-hmm. But people don't want things like that in their own life. I don't want to, before we go too far down that path, which is utterly fascinating to me, I want to go back to something you said. I want to talk about hormesis. Are you familiar with it by that name? You were describing it, so I know you know the concept.
Hormesis?
Basically, a little bit of bad ends up creating a positive effect, right? So a little bit of toxicity, which I think they found with Roundup, the weed killer. So a guy mixes a batch incorrectly, goes to kill the weeds, and it's weakened, but it was still poison. So he sprays a weakened poison onto these weeds, and they grow like crazy.
And they develop a resilience to it.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's that they develop a resilience. It's that it triggers a response, right? In fighting back against the toxicity or whatever the case may be. And I bring this up to go back to your Spartan example. I've heard you talk in interviews before about one of the category titles I created for today's talk is The Problem with Kids Today. And you've talked about how there's a sort of gradual softening and that kings of old didn't live as well as people that consider themselves to be below the poverty line today.
Exactly.
Can you define mental toughness? Like, what is its actual definition, sort of at its most fundamental level?
Mental toughness for me is you see only good in everything. Even if something catastrophic happens, you only see the good. Because there is good in all bad events. There is some good. If tomorrow a doctor tells you you're going to die in cancer in 6 months, well, you got to tell yourself, I'm going to live at another level in these 6 months because I know these days are numbered. So every day for me is going to be like a year. Every second is going to be like hours for me because I'm going to appreciate it that much. There's got to be something positive in whatever happens. One of my favorite new authors that I'm reading into now is Marcus Aurelius. And he wrote his journals, during the war with the Germanic tribes. He was writing in his journal, and this was just his own personal journal, it wasn't a book. And he was in this situation where he was leading the softer generation of Romans. The Romans that haven't gone through war. They're just living through the spoils of their fathers who went to war and dominated the world. So they weren't ready to go to war and fight these barbarians, etc. And they were more corrupt and wanted to live the good life, etc. And he's writing in this journal, and he's considered one of the great five emperors. He was one of the best leaders that Rome ever had. And he was basically saying that. He was saying you have to find the good in every single bad situation. And this is a guy who was on the brink of being destroyed by the Germans. He eventually defeated the Germanic tribes, but it was almost lights out for Rome at that time. And he reading this journal of his, and his thoughts, and he's like, your thoughts are what you soak your mind in, the dye you soak your mind in, and how you see the world. All depends on your thoughts. Because somebody who sees the positive in everything, you can't beat him. You have to kill him to beat him. Because no matter how low you put him down, if there's still a spark, he still believes he can climb to the top. Whereas somebody sees the negative and they start to convince themselves they're lost, they're easy to beat. They already beat themselves.
I really love that description, and that's something that my partners Ron, Mike, and I talk a lot about. Is when you're in business, you learn very quickly that you're operating without a safety net, right? So it can all go away. Not only tomorrow, it could go away today, right? I could walk off this set only to find out that some catastrophic thing has happened, and now we're out of business. And that really forces you to analyze, what do I have in my life to fall back on? And you talk a lot about what fighters that have nothing to fall back on, right? I think you quoted Don Shula, and having a 3-tier system of God, family, and football.
That's correct.
And in business, I find it's the same. If you don't have something to fall back on, you're going to be in real trouble. And the thing that we have collectively always focused on is what you just said, which is the guy that has a spark of hope. No matter how low you take him, he believes in his heart that he can rise back up. And it's interesting because I've never put that together as being mental toughness, but it's a pretty core component, certainly, of resiliency.
It's an incredibly important core component, because once you're depressed inside, it becomes a downward spiral of negativity. You can never let yourself have negative emotions for a prolonged period of time. And actually, it's a great thing that Marcus Aurelius also says that. He says, whenever you lose, you're off balance emotionally, see how fast you can bring yourself back to being positive and make it a game, he says, just see how fast. Because for him, bad things were happening every day.
Right.
Literally every day.
Right.
He was betrayed by his best friend, his wife left him, all these. He'd bring himself back to being centered. And this is key, because a person like that will be successful down the line, in the long run. That's the worst person to face. If that's your enemy, no matter what you throw at him, he will never go away. He'll never quit. In his mind, it's gonna work out in the end, somehow, some way. And I look around me all the time and I see people who were down and out and then came back to make it. They were down and out and they came back to make it. Like, you see that in corporations, you see that in individuals, you see that in fighters, you see that in actors, you see that all across the board. So winners see a bad situation as temporary. Winners see a bad situation as temporary. That's it. No matter how down and out you are, it's temporary.
Do they see the flip side as true as well, that a good situation should be temporary as well?
Yes, but one of the greatest books I've ever read is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
I've heard you recommend that.
This is the ultimate book. I read it when I was 19, and this is like the ultimate book. There's only one book I would recommend higher than this. And then the 7 habits, the first habit is be proactive. And he talks to you about what a proactive person does. People are reactive. So if you tell me, hey, I think you're the worst coach in the world, and I have this emotional feeling, and I have to manage these horrible feelings. I'm reacting to the world around me. I lose my business. Oh, now I'm reacting to the world around me. A proactive person, if he loses his business or whatnot, he's gonna say, well, now's an opportunity. I have all this free time. Here's other ventures I can do, and it's probably going to work out to be even better than what I used to have. He always believes he's going to have, when he loses something, he's going to find something better. He's not going to wait for somebody else to come and save him.
Right.
He doesn't give power to other people. Habit number 1 is be proactive. There are no excuses. There are no excuses.
Here's what I love about your overall philosophy, which is you've got to test your theories. Someone asked you in an interview one time, why did you get a degree in philosophy? And your answer was something along the lines of, I use my degree in philosophy every day because it teaches me to take a hypothesis and test its validity. And if it's not valid, then I move quickly past it. So not being a trained fighter, the thing that I tell people on my team is what I learned playing first-person shooters, right? So if you've ever played a first-person shooter video game, you're either alive or dead, right? It becomes very easy to figure out if what you're doing is working or not. And the same is true on a much heightened scale in the cage, where if what you're doing is working, you keep your arm from being broken, you keep your face from being beaten in, and you get the victory. And if it's not working, there's very real feedback, often tied to pain, and you so quickly have to learn to get rid of your ego. I think you say what? Check your emotions at the door?
In Socratic thought, the death of emotions is primary, because when your emotions always skew the way you see reality. And Socrates, he was very different than what you hear today. You know, everybody today is like, oh, reality is what you make of it, what you want it to be. Socrates was the polar opposite. He says, look, your emotions are getting in the way of what's really out there. You need to start checking your emotions at the door and just see what the world actually is in itself. And he actually believed that it was impossible to get to that point to 100%. But the more you lower your emotions, the more you lower your biases, the more you'll start to see the world as it is. And that was the greatest venture, is to see the world the way it actually is. And that's why I love, martial arts, because if you have a theory and you test it, talk about working without a safety net. You know, if your theory is no good, you're laying down on the floor. I mean, you're unconscious. You're in trouble. Your arm is broken. You've been choked out. There is no BS in fighting. Right. There is no, a lot of actors, Steven Seagal throwing guys around. This doesn't work. But they delude themselves, and I've met some stars. They delude themselves. They walk around, they strut like they've won 100 fights in a row. This guy, for me, he's in a hell. Right. He's living a hell, this guy. Because deep down inside, in his heart of hearts, he knows his life is a sham. And a person who's living a lie, they cannot be well balanced. They cannot be well adjusted in themselves. Because you can lose it all, but you can't lose your principles. If you live a principle-centered life, your foundation is solid. Whereas if you, let's say for instance, you have a great company, you have a lot of money, and you base your life on having this, well, you're going to be an insecure person, because money and fame and fortune is frail. You could lose it in an instant. You could wake up tomorrow and for whatever reason things fall apart. Now if you based your life on this, your base of your life will crumble. Some people base their life on another person. Let's say for instance a relationship. They're in love with a certain person. Well, that person might get sick and die, they might leave you, etc. So then your whole world will come crashing down if you base your life on this. If you base your life on being an athlete, being the best athlete, this is a Bo Jackson. He's the greatest athlete of all time. If his life was based on being the best athlete of all time, what happens when your hip is broken? And now you can't be this great athlete. Your whole life will come crashing down. So you can't base your life on something that's frail, that can be taken from you. So according to Stephen R. Covey, the human psyche will always be healthy if it bases its life on principles. And Socrates said the same thing, virtues, being a good person. This is the key.
Is that so? Man, I was waiting for the punchline of like, okay, if I don't build it on that, what do I build it on? Virtues is way too fucking vague. I'm not letting you off the stage.
No
so
problem,
what should people, as a man who literally builds the greatest athletes in the world, but I get a sense that you also work with them on what else is in their life.
Everything.
So what are those principles? What are those values that you...
Well, I'll give you for instance, okay? You're a CEO of a major company, but if you're a piece of shit for a human being, if you are,
right.
I tell people, hey, you could have 10 world titles, but if you're a piece of shit for a human being, I don't want to be friends with you. Me personally,
right,
you'll have a lot of friends, but me personally, I don't want to be friends with you, because it's going to be a fake friendship. Right. I'm going to be there because I need something from you or whatever. And true virtues is being just, being honest, being courageous, etc. These virtues are what makes somebody love you. So why do you love a person? Well, some people say, I have unconditional love. I don't really believe that's really true. I think I love a person because they're honest, courageous, they're loyal, etc. They have these virtues. The greatest virtue, according to Plato, was the good, being a good person.
How would you define that? How would you define being a good person?
The lack of corruption is what Socrates would say, and I'd have to agree with him. He says, look, if me and Tom are friends, and every time Tom is not looking, I steal from him, and that's the culture we've built. When I'm not looking, I know Tom is stealing from me, and I know that's the kind of guy he is. What's going to happen is we're going to secretly know we're both bad guys. So you're never going to trust me. We're never going to work together. We're going to be divided. And he says that eventually we're going to plot against one another. If you lie, cheat, and steal, you don't trust yourself. Your lies and your cheating and your stealing get out of control. And what happens is you start to build an enemy within your own self. So he says corruption is the root of all disaster. The great saying, they say, nations don't get murdered, they commit suicide. Right. Because once they become very successful and powerful, there's a lot of corruption. Once you become corrupt, you fall apart.
Do you think people are fighting against their innate nature to avoid becoming corrupt, or is it merely an echo of the people that they're around?
I think it's how you're raised. I think it's the culture you're raised in. You know, and in some cultures, if you look at our forefathers, they were born and raised in the Ten Commandments. You know, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. You look at today, we're not really taught not to lie, cheat, and steal. It's not really a theme anymore. It's not really a theme to not do bad things. Now it's kind of like it's cool if you're a badass and you get away with things. It's kind of starting to be cool almost. Because according to Socrates, you go through 3 phases. One, the first generation works really hard. The second generation comes up behind them. They see the hard work, but they don't work as hard because life is good.
Right.
And then the third generation behind them, they didn't see any hard work because their parents were well off, and all they saw was abundance. So they don't have that hard work, that work ethic that their forefathers had, that built. Like for instance, when Rome fell, 2-3 generations later, the youth didn't know who built the roads. They didn't know who built these buildings. Like, who built these great structures? Was it aliens? Was it the gods? It was actually their forefathers, but that's how far off the ladder they fell.
Right. So where are you in that cycle?
I like the truth. I like to get on the mat. If I'm going to teach something, I should be able to do it. If I'm going to tell you this is the way to punch a guy and this is how you're going to defend yourself, I should be able to get to do it. And I have students that are the best in the world. You know, they're in the top. So it's not an easy check to cash. It's not an easy check to cash. Like, I got to wrestle with Georges St-Pierre, Rory McDonald. You know, these guys are monsters. Now, if Georges St-Pierre gets on top of you, twists your arm and chokes you out, you can't tell him, hey, it would be better if you did it this way. I mean, why can't you know? Yeah. You can't talk the talk anymore. You can't say it. So I got to keep my skills extremely sharp.
All right. I want to go back for a second to what you were saying about the Socratic way of thinking, which I don't know his way of thinking well enough, but if you're telling me that it's essentially a pure logic play, I'm going to say that I prefer what you've been quoted talking about, which is the Da Vinci model, which is a balance between logic and art. Talk to us about the role of creativity and why you agree with that balance.
Well, Socrates wouldn't take creativity off the table. He's all for creativity. Leonardo da Vinci, though, took it to the next level. I think Leonardo da Vinci, he solved a lot of world problems. But you have to understand, in Socrates' time, everything was explained through myth. If it rained or there was an earthquake, they would attribute to the myth. So Socrates probably gave us the greatest leap in human history because he turned on reason. And one of his students, Aristotle, later on, gave us the square of oppositions. So I don't know if you've ever heard the great syllogism, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Right. Now this might seem like, oh yeah, it's obvious. In their time, it wasn't. And this became proof, evidence. Now we have a way to define what is true and what is not. Whereas before Socrates, anything can be true. You could just attribute it to a deity of some sort. There was no reason. He's the father of reason. So Da Vinci built on him. But Da Vinci, you're right, he brought in a lot of imagination and creativity. I mean, he had designs for a helicopter, planes. I mean, he engineered the most incredible ideas, but these are ideas that no man had thought of at the time. And, fast forward a few hundred years later, they exist now. You see an airplane, it's no big deal. But think about it, if you've never seen an airplane before and some guy was telling you, I'm going to build a machine that's going to go in the air, you'd think he's totally crazy. He was so far ahead of his time.
Right. What attracted you to fighting in the first place? Like it really does seem fascinatingly at odds with how able to extract true wisdom from great literature you are.
I got beat up a lot, Tom. I was small. I got my ass kicked many a times. People find it hard to believe when I tell them that. I used to get my ass kicked all the time. People are like, whoa, that's not possible. I was one of the smallest guys in elementary school. When I went to high school, I was very small. I used to get beat up by the seniors. They just kick my ass. And Socrates says this, he says like, is your body naturally healthy? No. So he says, we invented medicine, right? The science of medicine was to keep the body healthy. Do you find beautiful homes everywhere you go? No. We invented engineering, architecture to build shelters. We needed shelters. We invented a science. Now, you're getting your ass kicked every day. Is there a science to protect you from getting your ass kicked every day? Is there a medicine to that ailment? Yes, it's martial arts. I wanted it badly. Why? Because I was suffering badly from that ailment. I was getting my ass kicked all the time. So for me, martial arts was the greatest oasis. It was a way for me to get out of this hell I was living in. And that hell turned out to be something positive, like we were saying before. You turn a negative into a positive. And that's the key of life. Sometimes some people get a disease and they become healthier than ever afterwards. My parents My father, when he became diabetic, I was telling him, for years I was telling him, you're eating wrong. He'd laugh at me. When the doctor says you're diabetic, change the way he eats. Now he's lost all the weight.
Wow, he really actually made a change.
Absolutely. Well, when you're at the apex of destruction, you decide to do that or die.
A surprising number of people choose death.
Exactly.
No, really
True.
though, which is crazy.
True.
They wrote a book called Change
Yeah.
or Die, and it talks about how a group of people, they did a study, a group of people only had to take 1 pill a day to have like some massive reduction in their mortality risk. And something like over 90% of them failed to take the pill. All they have to do is take a pill, and they still fail to do that.
It's shocking to me.
It's shocking to say the least. Yeah, it's literally criminal neglect in your own life.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Now, you've said that everybody should do combat sports, not fight professionally.
No, not fight.
But everyone should do combat sports.
Yeah.
To what end?
Well, if you want to be a well-balanced human being, I think you need to have at least what we call a blue belt. And a blue belt is defined by Elio Gracie as you're able to beat a bigger, stronger, untrained opponent. You should be at that level. You should have core competency.
Now, is that largely because you don't want people to be taken advantage of? Is that why you think it's so critical?
Well, you know what? If somebody were to offend me and I sit back and I don't do anything about it, people will say, oh, he's patient. Because they know I have the ability to defend myself.
Yeah.
But if you have no ability to defend yourself and somebody offends you, somebody might say, oh, he's cowardly.
Right.
Or he's fearful. But I don't want to I want to be able to have the choice of being courageous or not. I want to have that choice. I want to be empowered enough to decide, hey, do I get up and say something, or I sit back here and practice patience, which is another virtue, by the way. So you have that choice afterwards.
Fuck. Well, I hope you guys are paying attention as closely as I am. That is one of the most powerful things that I've ever heard on this show. I want to have the choice to be courageous, man. That's really fucking powerful. That's gonna fuck with me here for a while. Yeah, I really like that. After you and I rolled, I came back and I thought, okay, this is one of the most profound experiences of my life. It was physically surprising in a way that I can't explain. So I've had a long-standing fascination with martial arts and Bruce Lee, and I trained briefly in Aikido, only to come to the realization when I went to show a roommate how one of the joint locks works, and he wasn't compliant, and I was like, what the hell? In class, man,
Reality
this
check.
really works.
Reality check.
So that sucked. And so that sort of shook my belief. So then meeting you, and the one thing that, man, I really would wish on the world, and one of the reasons, like, I've been pestering this guy. You don't understand how long I've been trying to get him on IQ, for a very long time. And we also sponsor some of the YouTube videos that you do where you're showing people how to fight. And it's not because the fighting is core to the Quest ethos. It's because I really want the world to hear the way that you conceptualize of our time on this planet, right? And I think a lot about what is a life well lived. And coming back from that trip and having rolled with you and having been sort of taken so off guard by what it meant to intellectually have to translate through my body, which I had never done before. I could always articulate through my mouth, and there was just a sort of a direct relationship that the human animal is very comfortable with, and I had spent years and years and years, decades even, getting very proficient at that. And so here I was, absolutely terrible at jiu-jitsu. It was hilarious, you having to show me, and you and Daniel both were being very generous with your patience. And I have a love of learning. So there was no ego hit for me to not be good at it. And I could feel this weird thing happening in my brain where my body wanted to get good at it. And so when I came back, I was talking to Ron, and I was like, dude, this is what you've been telling me about martial arts all these years. And it's a beautiful connection between the mind and the body that I really enjoyed. But I had to ask myself an honest question, like, how much time am I willing to put into this? And the honest answer is, it still lingers in the back of my mind. Like, I look for reasons to allocate more time and energy to it, because I really believe that my life will be less fulfilled if I don't. And the reason I've gone into all that based on that comment was that comment really affected me. And I'm somebody that opens myself up to being changed, and having the choice to be courageous, that changed me.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the greatest lessons I've learned, and I just learned it very recently, it was, I was reading the book, The Rise of Superman.
It's a great book.
It's an amazing book. And he was saying you have to find flow in everything you do. And I was always like, hard work, hard work, hard work. And last 10 years I've been doing a lot of hard work, Tom. I mean, I wake up early and I go to bed late, and I'm working 24 hours. And I realized that even the most strong-willed people, their battery starts to fade. Will is a commodity. It's finite. And I trained George, probably the most hard-willed human being I've ever met. You know, he has the world record for most minutes in the octagon fighting. Over 5 hours of fighting now. To prepare for a fight is months and months. And he's totaled more minutes in the octagon than any other human being. And even him, after a while, look, listen, I need a break. I need my batteries to drain. Will is finite. We have to find something more than will. And that book really opened my eyes because he says, look, if you're in a state of flow, if you want to do something and you go and do that thing and you find a state of flow when you're doing it, you won't need willpower. If you find flow in an activity, you will do it more than a person who's using hard-nosed will, who's just pushing himself, because that is finite. Whereas flow, it energizes you. It's the opposite. You'll do more of it.
Can I use your own words to echo that sentiment? You've said fat takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
You guys know my thing, right? I bring people on that I want you to go research more. And one of the speeches, if you do yourself the service of digging into Firas's talks, which are amazing, is he said, people come to him all the time and say, hey, I really want to use mixed martial arts to lose weight. What do I do? And his first question is, well, how hard did you have to work to get fat? You didn't, right? It was effortless. You enjoyed the meal and the fat just came as a result of that. And if you guys know Viktor Frankl, Viktor Frankl spent time in Auschwitz, survived, and he wrote a very powerful book called Man's Search for Meaning, and he talked about the people who don't survive, and they break mentally and emotionally, and he said the reason that they break is because they don't have something beyond the will to just grind it out. They're not attached to anything. Mm-hmm. They don't connect with something bigger. And he said, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue. That quote is one of the most powerful quotes in the world to me, because whether it's me, seeking something in fighting, or whether it's somebody seeking money, which is the question I get asked all the time, success in business, whatever the case may be, it's if you chase the end result, it is only going to recede into the background because your will is finite, right? You will just run out of energy trying to grab that thing. But if it ensues out of something and that was the fundamental shift we made at Quest, was we said, okay, we've been pursuing profits for almost a decade, and it's just receding, and it's not fun, and we're totally devoid of the will to go on at this point. So what if we switched it, and instead of pursuing that, we said, I'm just going to bring a ton of value to people, and I'm going to love what I do every day, even if I'm losing. Will the money ensue out of that pursuit? And of course, it ends up being the most successful thing we've ever done by like a factor of 1,000. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. But that's incredibly, incredibly powerful.
You remind me of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like we're talking about, if I dunk your head into water right now, your base need for oxygen will override everything else. Right. You're not thinking about your business, you're not thinking about your wife, you're not thinking about your car. You're thinking about, I need this oxygen right now. You're on the lowest end of the pyramid right now. And as you go higher, you need shelter, food, etc. Then you need friends, etc. Then you need ambitions, goals, etc. But the pinnacle is self-actualization. What do you call self-actualization? And that's exploiting all your potential, whatever potential you're good at. Like for instance, I'm made for combat sports. You're made for another thing. You have to exploit every ounce of potential you have, and that's how he says you'll actually ever truly be happy. If you're not moving up this hierarchy your entire life, if you ever stagnate, he says you'll find misery, you'll find discontent. Whereas if you keep pushing yourself, if you have a science you're pushing, you're discovering the principles of success and you're sharing them, and this is your calling, and that's how you're going to find a success, because that's what you're made for. And I find that people who get stuck in a place in their life where they're bigger than what they're doing, their potential is more, but they're not exploiting it, they're the ones who are unhappy, I would say. And if you push your potential to the maximum, you're worth more, and if you're worth more, the world will reward you.
How are you going to teach your kids to do that?
I never give them anything without them earning it. My kids have everything. If they do what they're supposed to do, if they train every day, they do their chores, etc., I will give them anything, as long as they do the work. The worst thing to do to a child, in my opinion, is to give them something without them working for it. Because now they think that they're owed something. Right. They didn't earn it. I want my kids to earn it. I want them to be hard-willed. If you see my kids on the mat, you would freak out. You know how well-trained they are and how robotic they're. I tell them something, they'll do it, like immediately. If I tell them a particular move, they'll do it. They'll get to the position. And people are amazed when they see them. And to them, it's easy. And I think the greatest thing you could teach somebody in life is to be proactive. you can learn to do anything. Your computer in your mind is the same as Da Vinci. It's the same as Einstein. You have the world's most powerful computer sitting in between your ears. You can program your mind for anything.
That's a very powerful statement. There's no question on it. I believe in that. I am deeply saddened for these people and for all of you watching at home. He said that to me when we were on the mats. And it's somehow so much more profound when you're like this. And he's just handed you your ass, very lovingly I might add, but just handed you your ass and telling you like, hey, I can walk you through the step-by-steps to get to where I am, or watch these guys who are rolling around. And by the way, they roll around with joy. All the guys on the mats, like they were going hard, but they were laughing and having fun. And yeah, it was really, really cool. And to hear the advice when you're dressed in gym attire and we're fucking sweaty and there's just that energy in the gym, it's so visceral and it stops being academic and it really becomes like this just meaty, tangible thing. It's really, really neat. Really neat.
I'm telling you something. There's something so special about being on the mat. There's something so special about it, the bond we build. The life lessons you learn. And I have this picture of my two sons in their gis. And one is 6 years old, one is 4 years old, and they're there in their gis. And I showed it to George. And he looked at it and he's like, that's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen. He told me that. And I could tell, that's me and George growing up on the mat all over again. You know, you find out so much about yourself when you're on the mat. There's no script. There's no lying. There's no guy who's dressed up in this attire, he's the best, and we have to take his word for it. No, he will get on the mat and he will show us, you know, physically, without a script, what is reality.
What would you do if you got paralyzed later this afternoon?
That's a good question. Luckily for me, I have philosophy. You know, I'm a very intrinsic person. You know, and I live inside my head, a lot in my head. I wake up in the morning, I need about 1 hour of silence. And I think that's so important because, like you said, if I was paralyzed tomorrow and I didn't cultivate that inner world of mine, I would be in trouble. It's a beautiful place inside your mind, you know. Being by yourself in total silence, you will have experiences of what it is to be conscious. And consciousness it's undescribable. It's something unique, and that's why I really believe that we have to cultivate not only the physical body, but the internal world, the conscious world.
Would you still train other people?
Yeah, I don't think I would be able to do it as good as other people would. So I would probably venture into doing, I would cultivate my intellect more, because for me to teach competitors, I would feel I'm not giving them the best. You know, some other guy can now take over and do better than I did. So I would probably put all my eggs in another basket.
It's interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about that answer. I'll give you a quote. I forget the general. It was a U.S. military general. I think his name is Chesty Puller. It's a real name. And he said, when you meet people, be kind, be courteous, but have a plan to kill everyone you meet. And I thought, I really like that quote. And I don't like it tongue in cheek.
Powerful.
I really like it because it's plan A, plan B, right? So, so take what you're saying. The plan is I have my physicality that allows me to have insights that other people will not have. I have this distinct advantage because I'm, you know, wrestling with George and I can win sometimes and I can get the upper hand and he sees, okay, whoa, like this guy's pushing his own wrestling, his own jiu-jitsu, his own striking. He's coming in every day trying to get just as good as I am. And that carries with it a ton of credibility. That's plan A. But it's interesting to me when you look at somebody like Stephen Hawking, whose plan B, at least of his own account, is more powerful than his plan A was. And he said, I never would have been able to answer these questions, the same questions he was focusing on. In physics, admittedly, a much less physical discipline, but he was like, in losing that area of focus, it allowed me to completely go into my mind. And not that I would ever want to you live the life that I want for you, but from the outside, what would be utterly fascinating is to see somebody with your clear mental power and capabilities be able to go, okay, I've lost this tool, like in a fight, right? I've gotten an injury to my knee, so I know certain things are out, but there's a whole nother side to my game that I'm gonna be able to use, and now I'm gonna get so good at this that I'll be more dominant than ever because I choose to be, right? I choose to put like my mental horsepower into getting really, really great at not having that. Anyways, it's something I think a lot about that as well. Like, what would I do? I think a lot about what would I do if the company crumbled tomorrow, which actually I have no anxiety about that whatsoever.
That's amazing.
Because starting, and there are things I have anxiety about, so that's not me trying to be cool. I'm fucking super anxious about other stuff. Just that isn't the thing. As long as, you know what makes me anxious? Losing the brotherhood. The three of us, like if I have those two other guys, like you could put us anywhere on earth, you drop us in, and we just have this rhythm together where we'll be able to start from nothing and build something back up. It scares the shit out of me, the thought of something happening to that. And we're super protective of that.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I'll tell you one thing, and it will be the other flip side of the coin. One of the best books I've ever read, it's called Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker. It's a very simple book. And he says basically, look, find out what your strengths are. Don't try to be someone you're not. Find out what are your strengths, and whatever gift you have, whatever potential you have, exploit that one thing to the maximum. And I think my best potential, and obviously I question myself a lot, is to be analytical, to break problems down and reduce them to the smallest component. These little components, you fix them up, you solve these little problems, and it reflects the rest of the grand scheme of things. And I think if I was paralyzed, I wouldn't be able to get on the mat and solve these little problems. I'd have to rely on someone else's feedback, which would be different than Stephen Hawking's, because he has professionals who can run controlled tests. Jiu-Jitsu is a little bit different. You have to feel it. You have to feel the situation. And I think I could take my analytical prowess and use it in another domain, because that's really what my core is. It's not really fighting. I really believe that it's about my core competence is breaking problems down to the smallest component. So now I'm trying I'm putting my attention on solving martial arts problems. I'm trying to innovate new strategies, etc. all the time. But I think I could take that and do something else with it as well. But that is my core competency, breaking things down, analyzing things.
Do you know the sound of a record like scratching and screeching to a halt when something happens in a movie? And they're like, so that's what just happened for me. The whole goal in doing this show was, when I met Mike and Ron, I felt trapped in the matrix. I felt like my life could be better, but I didn't know how to make it better. And they offered me basically the business equivalent of getting my ass handed to me over and over every day in the business world. No punches pulled, full contact right from day one, and learning and growing. And it was so amazing. It changed everything about my life. And it was ultimately a transition of mindset. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about that and saying, don't be distracted by the fact that right now I'm exercising my skill set through mixed martial arts, but that actually isn't the skill set. It can be applied more broadly. So the number one question that I get asked is, okay, hey, how do I follow in your footsteps? What's that, follow your passion? Okay, but how do I find my passion, right? If you can boil things down, not to think of it as MMA, but what is that thing that I'm really good at? I'm really good at breaking, or the thing that I really love doing. I love deconstructing this scenario, and so it wouldn't be as fun to utilize that skill in this application, but taking that same skill and applying it elsewhere. I think that being able to understand what it is that you love on like that really unreducible level, when you finally break it down to its final base component, then there's a level of control in your life, because you're able to see what you actually like. Because I promise you, most of you are getting confused by the surface thing, the way that you are currently exercising your skill sets, your loves, your passions, when in reality it's something several layers probably deeper than that. And once you identify that thing, then you're able to go out and do it. Like for me, I always say that Ron, Mike, and I started this company for three very different reasons. Ron is obsessed with solving nutritional challenges, and I think intellectually he's so far ahead of everybody, and he's so far down that road, and he continues to race down that road at just a neck-breaking speed, that he's able to do what he really loves, which actually isn't nutrition, but it's solving puzzles. And I dare you to ask him a simple question about Lost, the TV show, or the Black Dahlia, or Jack the Ripper, all of which he has solved, at least in his own mind, to very satisfying conclusions, and he will keep you going for hours, because what he likes is mystery. It's that discovering, it's figuring things out that other people can't figure out. And for me, it's about the moment of awakening. It's about the mind-body connection. It's about realizing through watching my own family that the body is a reflection of the mind. And at the end of the day, what I'm about is delivering happiness. I'm about seeing somebody transition from depressed to being a joy, and like how that changes not only their life, but the lives of everyone around them. That is my fucking drug of choice. And I am addicted, for us. I'm super into that. And once I realized that's what it was for me, that's why this show is the most logical thing I could do.
100%.
Yes, we make protein bars, but at the end of the day, we're making protein bars so that you can get your body in control, so that it will feedback loop to your mind, so that you can have a more fulfilled and joyful life. That's what it's about. So before we started the company, I said there's two ways to the mind. You can go through the body, Quest Nutrition, or you can go directly to the mind, Inside Quest. And that was why this, for such a long time, was a missing component of the brand. And this is why, because I really want to stay involved with you, because I want your content to be out in the world. I just want the world to be introduced to the way that you think. I think it's incredibly powerful, and it's been such a big honor to make that content happen. So, but getting into that, the most base and fundamental thing that somebody could be doing, and then exercising it. And that brings me to something I would love your take on, which is, what would you say is the description or definition of a life well lived to its fullest?
Well, I think you know the answer better than me, to be honest with you, because I don't know if you ever heard of Steve Chandler's hierarchy of selves.
I haven't.
Death is the lowest, right? You're dead. You're living, but you're dead. You just have no life in you. Then a little higher up is fear, worry, etc., anxiety, and then you go up higher. You have courage, happiness, and the top of the ladder is enthusiasm. When somebody's enthusiastic, you're the highest up on the ladder. You can't get any higher than this. This is like the pinnacle of the human experience, to be enthusiastic about something, to have that feeling. And you have an incredible amount of enthusiasm, and you're spreading it, and you made bars, and then you went from making bars to fulfilling your vision of spreading out a culture of success and looking at the mysteries of what makes people successful, and you're sharing that knowledge. You reached a level that's much higher than me, and I hope to get to that point, to be honest with you, because I'm grinding it out in the gym every day. I'm working with a small number of people, but at the end of the day, I want to work with the world. So a life well lived is what makes you enthusiastic. Find enthusiasm, and you're at the highest level of the human experience. Enthusiasm. It's actually, the path to happiness is enthusiasm. So for me, that's my answer to you.
My friend, thank you so much for being on the show today. Thanks for walking out, dude. I love spending time with you.
Same here.
No idea.
Same here.
Guys, wow. I really encourage you to rewind this, watch it again, listen. If you're in traffic right now listening to this as a podcast, go back to the beginning. You feel free to fast forward me, but get back to this guy. It is absolutely incredible the way that he looks at life and breaks it down. The hour of power, we'll call it, that he spends in the morning really going internal, dissecting his own life, dissecting his motivations and the things that drive him. We'll have to get him back to really go into detail and talk about what that looks like. But you hear in everything that he does, from the success that he's had in MMA as a fighter, the success that he's had as a coach, which is just mind-boggling, but most importantly, the success that he's had as a person. And I'm speaking as somebody that's gotten to know him at least a little bit long before we came on set today, and he's somebody that has just stayed in my mind. And there are people in your life I know that are like that, so you know what that feels like. Somebody that just feels like, man, they are on to something, and I want to be around them, and I want to follow where they're going. Because first of all, they're generous, and they're taking people with them. And this is a guy who takes people with him. If you're not into MMA, and even if you hate MMA, even if you think that MMA will be the death of Western civilization, I promise you, like, the way that he's able to learn life lessons, and more importantly, convey life lessons through that, the difficulties, the hard times that we will all face, and the resiliency that must be born of that, it is so beautiful to watch him do. And he is truly a generous man of spirit. Now I'm just going on, but I'm telling you, I fucking love this guy. So boys and girls, he will change your life if you give him a chance. You have to open yourself up to being changed, please. His name is Firas Zahabi. You can find him just about anywhere. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Firas Zahabi. Look him up. Let him change your life. I know he has mine. This is a weekly show, everybody. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. And if you want to get tickets like these amazing people who are going to get to ask him questions, then go to InsideQuest.com and you can get tickets there. You can also submit questions there. Guys, thank you so much. Until next week, be legendary, my friends. Take care.
Wow.